Then why are you still here? Alpha King Ethan Blackwood's voice was quiet, but the question seemed to fill the dark royal infirmary. Claire Bennett stood 6 feet away, holding a folded white cloth and wondering why every instinct told her to stay when every sensible thought told her to leave. Only minutes earlier, Lady Victoria Hale had rushed through those doors with tears in her eyes, becoming the 4th woman that year to reject the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. Claire had heard the rumors. Everyone had. Servants whispered them behind kitchen doors. Noble women traded them beneath glittering chandeliers. Some claimed there was something unusual about the king that made marriage to him impossible. Others exaggerated the story until Ethan Blackwood was no longer a man at all, only a cruel joke people repeated when they believed he could not hear. But Claire could see him now. Really see him. His black ceremonial coat hung open at the collar. His dark hair had fallen across his forehead, and beneath the cold authority that made entire packs lower their eyes, there was something painfully human in his expression. Shame. I asked you a question, Omega. Claire tightened her fingers around the cloth. I heard you. His silver-gray eyes narrowed. And you've heard what they say. Yes. The answer came too quickly to soften. Something changed in his face. Not anger. That would have been easier. Instead, he looked almost tired. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in courage and destiny, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us, love finds the broken. Now back to Claire. 3 days earlier, Claire Bennett had been nobody important. At 24, she worked quietly in the royal infirmary, carrying medicine, changing linens, and staying invisible whenever nobles passed through the marble halls. Being an Omega had taught her the usefulness of invisibility. People spoke freely around someone they considered beneath them, and lately every conversation seemed to circle back to one subject. King Ethan needed a Luna. The moon-choosing ceremony was supposed to solve that problem. Hundreds had traveled to Blackwood Palace from across the country, filling the great hall with silk gowns, polished boots, expensive perfume, and carefully rehearsed smiles. Claire watched from the edge of the room with a tray balanced against her palms as Ethan entered. The hall fell silent. He stood well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and composed, carrying the kind of presence that made even powerful alphas straighten instinctively. Yet Claire noticed something nobody else seemed interested in seeing. Ethan never looked at the women gathered for him. He looked at the exits, as though he already knew how the evening would end. When Lady Victoria finally approached him beneath the silver moon crest, her confident smile lasted only seconds. Then someone whispered into her ear. Her face changed. The color drained from her cheeks. Ethan saw it too. Your Majesty, Victoria said, her voice trembling. I cannot accept. 200 guests stopped breathing. Ethan remained perfectly still. Then, with a dignity that somehow made the moment hurt more, he removed the ceremonial ring from his hand and closed his fingers around it. Then you are free to go, he said. Victoria hurried away. Behind Claire, someone laughed softly. Another voice whispered the rumor. Claire lowered her tray. Across the enormous hall, Ethan turned toward the sound. For one brief second, his eyes met hers. And Claire did not laugh. Claire should have looked away. Every servant in Blackwood Palace knew that meeting the Alpha King's eyes for too long could be mistaken for disrespect, but something in Ethan's expression held her still. For a heartbeat, the enormous hall seemed to disappear around them. Then a nobleman near the silver moon crest cleared his throat, and Ethan turned away. Conversation slowly returned, softer now, careful and uneasy. Claire carried her tray toward the side corridor, but the whispers followed her. 4 women, a young beta murmured behind her. 4 in 1 year. His companion gave a quiet laugh. There has to be something wrong with him. Claire stopped walking. She had spent years learning when silence protected her, yet tonight's silence felt too much like agreement. Or perhaps there is something wrong with people who enjoy humiliating someone they have never bothered to understand, she said. Both men stared at her. One glanced at the plain gray dress that marked her as an infirmary worker. Did anyone ask the Omega? Claire felt heat rise into her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. No, that does not make cruelty less cruel. She walked away before courage could abandon her. What Claire did not know was that Ethan had entered the corridor behind them. He had heard every word. Later that evening, Claire returned to the infirmary expecting the palace to settle into embarrassed silence. Instead, the rejection became entertainment. Servants repeated different versions. Visiting nobles invented details. By midnight, the story had traveled farther than the truth ever could. Claire arranged glass bottles inside a cabinet and tried not to listen to two attendants whispering near the doorway. They say Lady Victoria learned the truth right before the ceremony. What truth? You know? About him. The second attendant lowered her voice. About his body. About why the others refused him. Claire closed the cabinet harder than she intended. Both women jumped. There are patients sleeping, Claire said. They apologized and left, but their words remained in the room like smoke. Claire had heard the rumor before. Everyone had. It was personal, humiliating, and impossible to verify, yet repetition had somehow transformed gossip into accepted fact. What bothered Claire most was not the rumor itself. It was how eagerly people used it to reduce Ethan to something they could laugh about. Near 1 a.m, Claire carried fresh linens toward the western wing. Moonlight stretched across the marble floor. She was passing the royal study when she heard voices through the partly open door. There must be another ceremony, an older man insisted. The kingdom requires a Luna. No. Ethan's answer was calm. Your Majesty, for refusals have already damaged confidence in the crown. Silence followed. Then Ethan spoke again. No woman will be brought before me because your council believes she owes this kingdom a marriage. Claire slowed. And the rumors? The man asked carefully. They are spreading. Let them. They are making you a joke. Another silence. Claire imagined the king standing behind that door, expression unreadable. When Ethan finally answered, his voice was quieter. Then perhaps a joke is all they ever wanted me to be. Claire's chest tightened. Footsteps approached the doorway. She hurried around the corner, but not before seeing Ethan emerge alone. The powerful king waited until the councilman disappeared. Then his shoulders lowered slightly, as if an invisible weight had finally become too heavy. He looked down at the ceremonial ring still resting in his palm. For the first time, Claire understood. Ethan Blackwood was not angry because women kept rejecting him. He had begun expecting them to. By breakfast, the story had changed again. Claire heard it before she even reached the infirmary, drifting through the servants' dining room beneath the clatter of silverware and coffee cups. Someone claimed Lady Victoria had discovered a terrible royal secret. Someone else insisted 3 previous candidates had warned her. Each version sounded more dramatic than the last, and not one person seemed troubled by the fact that nobody actually knew what was true. Claire poured coffee into a plain ceramic mug and took the empty seat at the far end of the table. Maybe that is why he is always so cold, an attendant named Melissa whispered. Imagine being rejected 4 times. A young servant laughed. I would stop trying after 2. Claire stared into her coffee. Maybe he wants everyone to think he stopped caring. The laughter faded. Melissa glanced toward her. You almost sound sorry for him. Claire lifted her eyes. I am sorry for anyone whose private life becomes public entertainment. He is the Alpha King. That does not make him less human. The room became strangely quiet. Claire immediately regretted speaking. Omegas survived palace life by being useful, agreeable, and forgettable. She had just failed at the third. She carried her mug away, unaware that Ethan was standing beyond the open archway with 2 royal guards. He had arrived silently, enough to hear her final words. Their eyes met for barely a second. Claire lowered hers and continued toward the infirmary, but her heartbeat followed her all the way down the hall. The morning became unusually busy. Guests preparing to leave after the failed ceremony requested remedies for headaches, sleeplessness, and nerves. Claire moved from room to room until sunlight filled the tall western windows. Near noon, Lady Victoria entered alone. Claire stiffened. Victoria looked different without the jeweled gown and ceremonial crown. Younger. Exhausted. You are Claire Bennet? She asked. Yes, my lady. Victoria hesitated. You were in the hall last night. Claire nodded. Then you saw what I did. There was no pride in Victoria's voice, only discomfort. I did. Victoria looked toward the closed door. I never wanted to embarrass him. Then why did you refuse? Claire asked before remembering her place. Victoria surprised her by answering. Because everyone told me I should be afraid. Claire remained silent. My mother heard stories from another family. My advisors repeated them. By the time I stood before him, I could barely separate Ethan Blackwood from everything people had said about Ethan Blackwood. Did the king ever treat you badly? Victoria's gaze dropped. No. That single word settled heavily between them. He was courteous every time we met. Claire felt something inside her shift. The rumor had become stronger than the man. That afternoon, she carried medicine to the royal library and found Ethan standing alone beside a window overlooking nearly 20 miles of forest. He did not turn when she entered. Leave it on the table. Claire obeyed. She was almost at the door when his voice stopped her. Miss Bennet. She turned. Ethan finally faced her. You defended me twice. Claire's breath caught. So he had heard. I defended what was fair. Those are not always the same thing. His expression remained controlled, but his eyes did not. Do you believe the rumors? Claire considered lying. Something told her he would recognize it instantly. I believe people repeat things they do not understand. Ethan stepped closer, leaving several respectful feet between them. That was not my question. Claire held his gaze. Then no. I do not believe a rumor should decide who you are. For the first time, the coldness in his face cracked. Not into a smile. Into surprise. Then a low warning bell sounded somewhere beyond the library, and Ethan suddenly went still. His hand tightened around the edge of the table. Claire sensed the change before she understood it. Something was wrong. Your Majesty? His silver-gray eyes flashed toward her. Leave, Claire. Are you sick? Leave. She should have obeyed. Instead, Claire noticed his unsteady breathing and took one careful step toward him. Ethan stared at her as though she had just done something no woman before her had dared to do. She had moved closer. Claire took another step. Ethan's expression hardened, but the effect was weakened by the way his hand remained braced against the table. The warning bell sounded again somewhere beyond the library, low and distant, followed by hurried footsteps in the corridor. I told you to leave. And I heard you. Claire kept her voice calm. But something is wrong. Ethan looked toward the door as if calculating how quickly he could reach it. It will pass. What will pass? He did not answer. Claire noticed his breathing first, controlled but uneven, then the tension in his shoulders. She had seen similar signs in frightened patients fighting against their own instincts, pretending control would return if nobody witnessed them losing it. Sit down, she said. Ethan stared at her. Was that an order? Medical advice. Something almost amused flickered across his face before disappearing. You are remarkably brave for someone who works very hard to remain invisible. Claire paused. You noticed that? I notice more than people think. Another wave of discomfort crossed his expression. He closed his eyes briefly. Claire moved toward the medicine table. What happened? Nothing you can treat. You do not know that. Claire. Hearing her first name in his voice stopped her. It was not commanding now. It sounded almost like a warning meant to protect her rather than himself. My wolf becomes restless after ceremonies, involving the mate bond. Usually I am alone when it happens. Claire understood. For public refusals, endless gossip, and an ancient instinct constantly reminding him that something was missing. No wonder the ceremony had affected him. Then I will leave if that is what you truly want, she said softly. Ethan opened his eyes. You should. Claire waited. But his jaw tightened. I did not say there was a but. You looked like there was one. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Ethan released the table and sat in the chair beside it. The simple surrender surprised her more than any royal command could have. Claire poured cool water into a glass and placed it within reach without touching him. Thank you, he said. She blinked. She had never heard the Alpha King thank a servant. You are welcome. The room gradually quieted. Outside, clouds moved across the afternoon sun, turning the library silver-gray. Ethan's breathing steadied, yet Claire could still sense an unsettled energy beneath his composure. She had always been unusually sensitive to emotion. It was an omega trait people dismissed as weakness. Here, it told her something important. Ethan was not dangerous. He was afraid of being seen without his armor. Why did you stay, he asked. Claire looked at him. Because you needed help. Everyone believes they know what I need. I did not say I knew. That finally brought the smallest smile to his face. It vanished almost immediately, but Claire saw it. You are different from the women who come to this palace. I am not here to marry you. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Claire realized how bold that sounded and nearly apologized, but he gave a quiet laugh instead. It was warm, unexpected, and so unlike the man described in palace gossip that Claire found herself smiling too. Then his expression suddenly changed. He inhaled slowly, his silver-gray eyes fixing on her with startling concentration. Claire's smile faded. "What is it?" Ethan stood, not threateningly, carefully, as though one wrong movement might break something neither of them could see. "Your scent," he murmured. Claire instinctively touched her collar. "What about it?" Ethan did not answer. Somewhere deep inside Claire, the quiet wolf she had spent years ignoring lifted its head. Warmth moved through her chest, gentle but unmistakable. Ethan stepped back as if distance could silence whatever he had just recognized. His face lost all color. Claire's heartbeat quickened. "Your Majesty?" He stared at her, no longer looking like a king, only a man confronted by something impossible. Inside him, an instinct older than crowns whispered a single word. "Mate." Ethan stepped away from Claire so quickly that the distance between them felt colder than the room itself. The word still echoed through his mind. "Mate." It should have brought relief. For generations, wolves had prayed for that recognition, trusting the moon to place the right soul in their path. Ethan felt only fear. "You need to go," he said. Claire stared at him. "Did I do something wrong?" "No." His answer came too fast. Her wolf had awakened too, not with panic, but with a strange certainty that made Claire suddenly aware of every quiet detail around them. The ticking clock, the rain beginning against the tall windows, the space Ethan was deliberately putting between them. "Then tell me what happened." Ethan turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, nearly 20 miles of dark forest stretched beneath gathering clouds. "Nothing happened." Claire almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in his voice. "You looked at me as if the world stopped." Perhaps it did. He regretted the words immediately. Claire waited. Ethan had commanded armies, negotiated with hostile pacts, and stood before councils determined to challenge him. None of that had prepared him to explain this to an Omega who had offered him kindness without asking for anything in return. "There is an old recognition between wolves," he finally said. "Something instinctive." Claire's heartbeat quickened. "A mate bond." Ethan looked at her. That was answer enough. Claire felt the room tilt beneath her. All her life, she had been told an ordinary Omega should consider herself fortunate if any respectable wolf chose her. Now the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories was standing 10 feet away, looking almost frightened because fate had apparently chosen her for him. "You think I am your mate?" she whispered. "My wolf does." The distinction hurt more than Claire expected. "But you do not." Ethan's expression tightened. "That is not what I said." It sounded like it. He crossed the room, then stopped before coming too close. "Claire, for women entered this palace believing they might become my Luna. Every one of them eventually became afraid of what that meant. I watched rumors turn uncertainty into fear before I could even speak for myself. I am not them." "Exactly." The force behind the words startled her. Ethan lowered his voice. "You came near me when I was struggling. You defended me when there was nothing to gain. You saw a man who needed help before you saw a crown." Claire searched his face. "Then why are you pushing me away?" Ethan could not answer immediately. Because he had spent years telling himself rejection no longer mattered. Because every woman who walked away had made the next refusal easier to expect. Because accepting the bond meant giving Claire the power to become the one rejection he might not survive emotionally. But there was another reason, one stronger than fear. Because fate does not get to take away your choice. Claire went still. "What?" "You are an Omega employed in my palace. I am your king. If I announce this bond, everyone around you will tell you it is an honor. The council will call it duty. Your wolf may call it destiny. I will not become another voice telling you that you have no right to say no." Something inside Claire softened, but the hurt remained. "So you decided for me instead." Ethan froze. "You were so determined not to trap me that you never considered I might choose to stay." The words landed quietly. Claire turned toward the door. Ethan took one instinctive step after her, then stopped himself. That hesitation told Claire everything. He wanted her near. He simply did not trust himself to believe she might want the same. Her hand reached the door. "Claire." She looked back. Ethan stood beneath the silver light, powerful enough to command an entire kingdom and somehow unable to ask one Omega not to leave. "I will not claim you because fate tells me to," he said. Claire held his gaze. "Then someday, Ethan, you might have to believe me when I tell you what I choose." Claire left the library before Ethan could find another reason to stop her. By evening, the strange warmth of the bond still followed her through every corridor of Blackwood Palace, but Ethan did not. He sent no message. He summoned no counsel. He made no announcement. Somehow, his silence hurt more than a command would have. Claire spent the next morning preparing medicine and telling herself that nothing had changed. She was still Claire Bennett, still an Omega working in the Royal Infirmary, still someone nobles barely noticed unless they needed something. Yet now she knew fate had placed an invisible thread between her and a man who seemed determined not to touch it. Near sunset, Claire folded her uniforms into a small traveling case. She had enough savings for a room in a town 12 miles south of the palace. The infirmary there had once offered her work. She had declined because Blackwood Palace paid better. Now distance felt more valuable than money. She had nearly finished packing when someone knocked. Ethan stood outside her door. No guards. No royal coat. Just a white shirt beneath a dark vest and an expression Claire could not read. His gaze fell to the case. "You are leaving. Tomorrow morning." His jaw tightened. "Why?" Claire stared at him. "You truly have to ask?" Ethan stepped inside only after she moved aside. "I told you I would not force the bond. And somehow you turned that into pretending it does not exist. I am trying to protect your choice." "No. You are protecting yourself." Silence settled between them. Ethan looked away first. Claire's voice softened. "You think you are the only person who knows what rejection feels like." His eyes returned to hers. "Claire, I have spent my entire life hearing what an Omega should be. Quiet, grateful, easy to overlook. Men have spoken over me because of my rank. Noble women have handed me empty glasses without even looking at my face. I learned how to disappear because being invisible was easier than being reminded where everyone thought I belonged." Ethan said, "Nothing. Then my own mate recognizes me. And what does he do?" Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. "He steps away." Pain crossed Ethan's face. "I never rejected you." "Then what are you doing?" He opened his mouth, but no answer came. Claire shook her head. "You are afraid I will become the fifth woman who leaves." Ethan went completely still. The truth had finally been spoken aloud. Rain whispered against the window behind them. "For times," he said quietly, "I watched someone look at me differently after hearing those rumors. Eventually, I stopped wondering whether the next woman would leave. I only wondered how long it would take." Claire's anger softened. "And now the person standing in front of me matters." His voice dropped. "That makes the possibility worse." Claire finally understood. The Alpha King was not refusing destiny. He was terrified of believing in it. "Ethan, I cannot promise you what I will feel 10 years from now." She moved closer, stopping several feet away. "But I can tell you what I choose today." Hope appeared in his eyes before caution buried it. "And what is that?" "I choose not to judge you by gossip. I choose to know you for myself. But I cannot do that while you keep deciding what is best for me." Ethan breathed slowly. "Then stay." 2 simple words. No royal authority. No alpha command. Just a request. Claire looked toward her packed case. For one heartbeat, she almost unpacked it. Then footsteps hurried through the corridor. A royal messenger appeared at the doorway, pale and breathless. "Your Majesty, forgive me. The Moon Council has called an emergency session." Ethan's expression changed instantly. "For what reason?" The messenger hesitated. "Your right to remain on the throne without a recognized Luna." Claire felt the bond tighten like a warning. Ethan looked at her, and she saw the old expectation returning to his eyes. Once again, someone had decided his worth depended on whether a woman chose him. The Moon Council did not wait until morning. Within an hour, 12 council members had gathered beneath the silver crest in the eastern chamber, and Claire could hear their voices through the closed doors as she stood at the far end of the corridor with her traveling case still packed upstairs. "The kingdom needs stability," one man declared. "4 failed ceremonies have become an embarrassment." Ethan answered with the same controlled calm Claire had heard in the royal study. "Then stop holding ceremonies. That does not solve the succession problem. Neither does forcing frightened women toward a crown they do not want." Claire moved closer without meaning to. Another councilman spoke, older and smoother. Lord Harrison Vale, Lady Victoria's uncle, had spent 20 years advising the throne. "Public confidence is collapsing because people believe no woman will willingly accept you." Claire felt something cold settle in her stomach. The wording sounded familiar. Too familiar. She had heard almost the same sentence from Lady Victoria. Before Claire could think further, the chamber doors opened. Harrison stepped into the corridor carrying several papers. He stopped when he saw her. "Miss Bennet." Claire lowered her eyes politely. "My lord." His gaze lingered on her. "You work in the infirmary." "Yes." "Then perhaps you should remember that servants who become interested in royal matters rarely benefit from it." He walked away. Claire remained still until his footsteps disappeared. Something about the warning bothered her. She entered the infirmary records room 20 minutes later, searching for Lady Victoria's treatment form from that morning. Claire told herself she only wanted to confirm a detail. Instead, she found a sealed envelope tucked beneath the form. Victoria must have left it accidentally when removing papers from her purse. Claire recognized Harrison Vale's crest immediately. She should have returned it unopened. Then she noticed the envelope was already unsealed. Inside were copies of letters addressed to 3 families whose daughters had attended previous moon-choosing ceremonies. The language was careful, respectful, poisonous without ever becoming openly cruel. Each letter warned that marriage to Ethan carried unspecified private risks. Each encouraged the families to protect their daughters from circumstances unsuitable for a proper Luna. Claire's hands went cold. 3 families, 3 women, 3 refusals. She searched further and found another note addressed to Victoria's mother, dated 2 weeks before the ceremony. This one referred to rumors that should be allowed to mature naturally before Victoria met Ethan. Claire read the sentence twice. The gossip had not simply spread. Someone had cultivated it. Footsteps sounded behind her. Claire turned to find Victoria standing in the doorway. Her face changed when she saw the letters. "Where did you get those?" "They were with your papers." Victoria closed the door. "My uncle told me never to show anyone." Claire's pulse quickened. "Did he tell you the stories about Ethan?" Victoria nodded slowly. "He told all of us. All 4 women. He contacted our families before every ceremony." Claire finally saw the pattern. A king without a Luna had no recognized royal bond. Without that bond, the Moon Council could challenge his succession plans and gradually weaken his authority. Why would your uncle want that? Victoria looked toward the corridor. Because if Ethan is removed without an heir, the council chooses who governs until another royal alpha is confirmed. Claire understood. Harrison was not afraid of Ethan finding the wrong Luna. He was afraid Ethan might find one at all. That evening, Claire returned to her room and stared at the packed case on her bed. She had wanted distance. She had wanted time to decide whether Ethan could trust her choices. Now she possessed something he had never been given. Proof that years of rejection had been carefully encouraged by people who benefited from his loneliness. Claire closed the case, but she did not pick it up. Instead, she gathered the letters and walked toward the council chamber. Halfway there, a palace bell rang 3 times. A servant rushed past her. "What happened?" Claire asked. "The council has scheduled a public judgment tomorrow morning." Claire tightened her grip on the letters. "A judgment for what?" The servant looked frightened. "Whether Ethan Blackwood is still fit to remain Alpha King." Claire looked toward the great hall. She had spent her life disappearing whenever powerful. People entered the room. Tomorrow, disappearing was no longer an option. By 9 the next morning, every seat in the great hall was filled. Pack leaders had traveled through the night. Council members occupied the raised platform beneath the silver moon crest, and hundreds of witnesses stood behind velvet ropes along the marble floor. Ethan sat alone before them. No crown rested on his head. No royal guards stood beside his chair. For the first time since Claire had known him, he looked less like a ruler being honored than a man being measured by people who had already decided what he was worth. Lord Harrison Vale rose slowly. "This council does not question His Majesty's strength or years of service. We question whether a kingdom dependent upon stable succession can continue indefinitely without a recognized Luna." Murmurs moved through the hall. Ethan remained still. "4 candidates have refused the bond," Harrison continued. "The public deserves to know why." Claire stood outside the closed doors with Victoria beside her, the letters held tightly against her chest. "Once you walk in there," Victoria whispered, "my uncle will know I helped you." Claire looked at her. "You can stay here." Victoria swallowed. "No, I should have asked questions sooner." Inside, Harrison's voice grew louder. "Perhaps some truths cannot remain hidden simply because they embarrass the crown." Claire felt anger rise, not hot or reckless, but clear. She pushed open the doors. Hundreds of faces turned. Ethan rose immediately. Claire. She walked forward in her plain gray infirmary dress, hearing whispers follow every step. Harrison's expression tightened. This proceeding is restricted. Then perhaps you should not have built it on information you spread beyond these walls. Silence fell. Claire placed the letters on the council table. Harrison stared at them. Where did you obtain those? From the women you frightened before they ever had the chance to know their king. Victoria entered behind her. A wave of surprise moved through the crowd. They are genuine, Victoria said. My uncle contacted my family before the ceremony. He encouraged us to believe rumors about Ethan and presented speculation as warning. Ethan looked from Victoria to Claire, disbelief breaking through his composure. Claire opened the first letter. 3 previous families received nearly identical messages. Each was encouraged to fear private circumstances that were never proven. Each refusal weakened the crown, and each refusal increased the council's ability to challenge the king. Harrison stood. You are an infirmary worker interpreting matters beyond your understanding. Claire met his eyes. I understand humiliation perfectly well. No one laughed. I understand what happens when powerful people repeat a story until everyone mistakes repetition for truth. She turned toward the gathered pack leaders. You were told no woman could willingly choose Ethan Blackwood. You were never told how carefully some people worked to make that prediction come true. The hall erupted into uneasy whispers. Ethan said nothing. He was looking only at Claire. Harrison attempted to regain control, but Victoria stepped forward and confirmed every meeting, every warning, every carefully planted suggestion. Other council members began examining the letters. The certainty that had filled the room minutes earlier began to fracture. Finally, Ethan descended from the platform and stopped several feet from Claire. His voice was quiet enough that the hall strained to hear it. Why did you come back? Claire's heart tightened. Because you deserve the truth. Ethan searched her face. Is that the only reason? She knew what he was asking. Not as king. Not as alpha. As the man who had been expecting everyone to leave. Are you here because fate sent you? He asked. Claire shook her head. No. Pain flashed across his face before she continued. Fate may have introduced us, Ethan. It does not get to make my decisions. She stepped closer. I came because I chose to. Ethan stopped breathing. Claire's wolf stirred with quiet certainty. I choose the man who let a frightened woman walk away without punishment. I choose the man who thanked an omega when nobody was watching. I choose the man who was more afraid of taking away my freedom than of losing me. The great hall became perfectly still, and I choose you knowing I could still walk out those doors. Something warm moved through the air between them, gentle and unmistakable. Ethan's silver-gray eyes softened. For years, every important woman had approached him because someone expected her to. Claire Bennett had been given every reason to leave. She had returned because nobody ordered her to. Ethan looked at Claire as though the hundreds of people surrounding them had disappeared. For years, he had learned to recognize the moment someone changed after hearing the rumors. A hesitation, a lowered gaze, a careful step backward. He had become so familiar with rejection that acceptance felt almost impossible to trust. Yet Claire stood before him without obligation, without a noble title, without anyone pushing her toward the throne. She had been free to leave. She had chosen to return. Ethan slowly stepped forward, then stopped several feet away. Claire Bennett, he said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. I will not ask you to accept a crown because the council demands it. I will not ask you to stay because our wolves recognize something neither of us expected. Claire's eyes softened. Then what are you asking? Ethan did something that sent a stunned murmur through the room. The Alpha King lowered himself to one knee. Claire stared at him. Around them, council members rose from their seats. Pack leaders exchanged astonished looks. Ethan ignored them all. I am asking as Ethan Blackwood, he said. Not as your king. Not as your alpha. Knowing every rumor, every weakness, and every reason you could choose another life, would you still choose to discover this one with me? Claire felt tears gather in her eyes. She remembered every year spent making herself smaller so other people would feel comfortable. She remembered servants speaking over her, nobles forgetting her name, and a world that treated Omega as another word for less. Now the most powerful man in the Northern Territories was not ordering her to kneel before him. He was kneeling before her choice. Claire offered her hand. Yes. Ethan looked up. Yes. A small smile broke through her tears. I choose you, Ethan. Not because you are Alpha King. Not because fate says I should. I choose you because when you had every power to command me, you gave me freedom instead. Ethan took her hand gently. The instant their fingers touched, warmth moved through Claire's chest. Her wolf lifted its head with peaceful certainty, and Ethan closed his eyes as the same recognition settled through him. There was no fear this time. No need to retreat. When he stood, he did not pull Claire toward the throne. He remained beside her. Equal distance. Equal choice. Across the hall, the council members examined Harrison Vale's letters, and the challenge against Ethan's reign began to collapse beneath the truth. Victoria stepped beside Claire with a relieved smile. Harrison could no longer control a story once the people he had manipulated were willing to speak. But Claire barely noticed. Ethan was still looking at her. You stayed, he whispered. Claire shook her head gently. No, I left. Then I came back. There is a difference. Ethan understood immediately. Staying could come from fear, duty, or having nowhere else to go. Returning required a choice. Months later, when Claire stood beside Ethan beneath the silver moon crest as the kingdoms recognized Luna, she still wore the simple pendant she had owned while working in the infirmary. She kept it to remember the woman she had been before anyone called her queen. Ethan never asked her to become smaller beside his crown, and Claire never allowed old rumors to define the man beneath his. The kingdom eventually remembered their story not because an Alpha King finally found a Luna, but because two people the world had reduced to labels learned to see each other clearly. True strength had never been about rank, reputation, or what strangers whispered behind closed doors. Sometimes strength was simply giving another person the freedom to walk away and having enough courage to believe them when they returned. And if Claire and Ethan's story reminded you that dignity, kindness, and love can be stronger than rumor, please like this video, share it with someone who loves stories about destiny and second chances, and subscribe to the channel for more stories, where the forgotten are finally seen and the rejected discover where they truly belong.